All right, Pickle. Let's talk a little bit about last night. So,
It happened.
I have gotten to the point where if it is an evening sporting event
Okay.
and I cannot lock in, like if it's an important evening sporting event
Mm-hmm.
and I cannot lock in for the duration, I am DVR and catch-up guy. Okay?
Yeah, it's nice. You can fast forward through the commercials.
I am DVR and catch-up guy. And so last night, bedtime duty called. And first of all, 6:45 kick, huh? Huh. I get it's on the West Coast.
I was just gonna say they did that so it wasn't a 9:30 kick on
You know
in the
what?
East Coast.
Make the East Coast suffer. They decided to live on the East Coast. Don't punish God's time zone. Also, a 4:45 local kick. Weird.
I liked
Living
it.
in California must be weird. Like, just from a sports perspective. Like, living
Mhm.
on the West Coast. Must be weird. Anyway.
It's weird on either of the coast, honestly.
Yeah, that's why we live here. In
God's time zone.
So, I did my bedtime duties and all that fun stuff. For my son, not for me.
For you. He was like 7:30 rolled around and it's time to put on my
And
jammies.
cleaned up the kitchen, stuff like that. And it got to be, it was probably
Made
about
pudding.
8. No, that was post-game.
Oh,
That was post-game pudding.
oh okay.
Got to
My
be about
bad.
8 o'clock, little after 8, before I was like, cool, I can sit down and I can now actually devote my attention to the national championship game. They've got about an hour and 20 head start on me, which is perfect because zoom through commercials, zoom through halftime, et cetera, et cetera. But first,
Were you staying off of social media at this point?
I was trying to stay off social media.
Because that's the key to being
Oh, yeah.
DVR guy. You cannot hop
No.
on Twitter.
So I have my phone charging in the other room, but I was like, okay, great. Before I sit down on the couch, I'll grab my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Not a text message from my brother.
Oof.
And my brother said something along the lines of,
Assuming this is Matt.
yes, my older brother, starting to wonder if this is going to be Alabama Notre Dame. And of course, that was a very famously a lopsided national championship game. And at that point, I was worried about our fair frogs because going into last night, if there was going to be a blowout, Pickle, I'm fairly certain we knew which way the blowout was going to go.
It would have been truly a sports, like, dumbfound moment if there was a blowout that went the other
If
way.
TCU just whipped them up and down the field, right?
That would have been like
shocking.
mouth drop.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Georgia wins the national championship game, squeaks by with a 65-7 victory over TCU. And we knew going into the game that TCU was a pretty sizable underdog.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew, and with that, I think we knew, either saying it explicitly or feeling it implicitly, that the path to victory for TCU was going to be relatively similar to their path to victory over Michigan in the national semifinal, which was, you got to play great.
Mm-hmm.
Your opponent needs to fart around a little bit.
And you got to stop the run.
You got to come up with a couple big splash plays.
Mm-hmm.
That was basically it. You needed to play your best game. They need to have a relatively off night, and you'd probably need to have one or two big plays.
And 3 turnovers in the first half does not equate to that.
So let's talk about both sides, because this is a both sides thing. On the TCU side, they played terrible.
Mm-hmm. They were making mistakes that they have not made in any other game throughout the year.
I don't think that they could have played worse. And functionally, what we're talking about, and there's going to be a lot made about the fact that this was a 65-7 game. There is no real tangible difference, in my opinion, between 38-7 and 65-7. They're all blowouts. They're all butt kickings. It was garbage time entirely in the second half. When it was 38-7 at halftime, the game was functionally over. The rest of the game is in garbage time as well. So when we're talking about the game, what I mean is the first half. Everything that happened in the second half is window dressing, in my opinion. But TCU played terrible. I thought Max Duggan, pretty poor. They were not able to run the ball. I don't know how much they missed Kendre Miller, but I thought they got bullied in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
They got their teeth kicked in the trenches. Part of this is it's a holistic failure from TCU. It's a holistic failure. It's on the coaches because I thought that their game plan offensively was lacking. Specifically, they were fairly sure that they could take advantage of a relatively vulnerable Georgia secondary.
Mm-hmm.
But what they forgot is that Max Duggan would need time to throw to get these deep routes going. And basically, they hit one big play. They won big play. It was the 60-yarder to Darius Davis, and that's about it. That's the entirety of it. They were able to do it once, and the rest of the time, Max Duggan was being harassed in the backfield, and any sort of deep shots they were looking to take were not there. And then at that point, they smell blood in the water, and they go from there. So, and then that's the offensive side. The defense, I probably don't need to tell you, horrifying last night.
It was really, really bad. And I think number one happened, and you can go roll back the tape on our preview episode when we were talking about this game, and we said that both of our largest concerns was them stopping Stetson Bennett on the run. Because we know that he can pass it, and the secondary got absolutely torched last night. As much as we blew up how good that secondary was, they looked confused. They looked like they played scared. It was very, very disappointing to see how the secondary played. But I think that we hit the nail on the head that the way that Georgia was going to destroy them, if that was to happen, was going to be allowing Stetson Bennett to get out of the pocket and just run past him. And he did that time and time and time again. That first touchdown when he ran it in, I was going, oh, God.
The defensive line got clobbered. And Stetson Bennett, nobody came within 5 yards of him. He could do whatever he wanted. And the secondary just didn't match up, plain and simple. Part of it is that there was no pressure, and so if you've got 8 seconds to throw, you're going to be able to do whatever you want. But they couldn't stop the run. So that's part of it. Okay, part of it is that TCU played terrible. I don't know that they could play a worse game. Let's also give a lot of credit to Georgia, who I don't know that they could play a lot better than that.
No.
That was, I count, basically, again, we're talking first half because that's when the game was
a game.
Second half is basically just an exhibition.
Recess.
I count in the first half 2 genuine negative plays. 2 plays that they operated that I think TCU won those plays. Okay? One of them was third and 7 at the TCU 10. They're up 7-0, and TCU's just fumbled. They hand the ball to Darius Davis. He fumbles. They cough up the ball. TCU and they get the ball at the 33-yard line. TCU 33. 3rd and 7 at the TCU 10. Stetson Bennett pressured, has to check it down to DeJuan Edwards, and they stop him short. That was a really important play for TCU to force a field goal when you're giving them the ball basically in field goal range already. That was
especially after a turnover.
That was one winning play for TCU. Okay,
and there was one
negative play for Georgia.
And there was very much still life in that game at that point.
The other play,
huge life.
The other play was the long pass to Darius Davis.
Yeah, 65 yards.
60 yards.
60.
That's and at that point that set up their only touchdown of the game. And that was a certified winning play for TCU. That was a negative play for Georgia.
And that was followed by it because that 63-yard came after they held him. And so at that point, it was 14-7?
The rest of the game as it functioned in any sort of meaningful way, Georgia was almost perfect. Almost perfect. I don't mean to be glib, and I don't mean to be reductive, but Georgia just has better players and they have more of them. Okay? That sounds like simple and reductive, but it's the truth. You go read Mike Craven's column that he wrote there at SoFi Stadium last night. And he basically lays it out. Georgia just has more better players. That's just it. The rosters are not super comparable at this point. To wit, our friends at 247 Sports, according to them, Georgia has the second most talent-rich roster in college football. 68 of their 85 scholarship players are 4- or 5-star players. 68 out of 85. That's incredible. TCU ranks 32nd. Okay? 17 of their 85 are 4 or 5 stars coming out of high school. Now, that's not everything, but recruiting is the lifeblood of the sport. And so, if you have a more talented roster, which Georgia very clearly did, they're going to have the advantage. And if you start making mistakes, that is how you get 65-7 in a national championship game.
Right, and I think that was the most evident in my mind, again, watching the TCU defensive backs go up against the wide receiving core that Georgia has. That's a very good defensive unit. There is no doubt about it. They just were outsized. They were athleticism. Like, there was nothing that TCU could do to match up to that level.
You don't see it a ton. You don't see it really in the NFL unless you're seeing, like, the Chiefs play the Texans.
Yeah, and
where there's just a talent gap,
yep.
Right? There's just, and I'm not trying to insult TCU, just the truth. I think this says more about Georgia than it does about TCU.
Yeah, well,
they operate in a different universe.
Yeah, and I think that you can compare them to almost anyone. I mean, Ohio State played them really, really well. There's no denying that, but you can compare them to almost any other team.
But Ohio State's in that echelon too.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not just this isn't a TCU thing. I think that you could put them up against a name brand like Texas, and they would still the talent gap would still be huge. This is like here, and then the field is basically what this ranking is.
That shows to me the gap between what is functionally, and we can talk about whether or not that's a problem for college football, but the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
Right? And you saw that on full display last night. Can I tell you what I thought was the biggest play of the game last night?
Yeah.
Norm Hitchcock does this on the ticket all the time. He's like, 5 key plays you might have missed. There's 44 seconds left in the first quarter. It's 17-7. Georgia's just gone down and scored. But TCU is driving. Okay? 10-yard run for Amari DiMercato, first down to the 32. 7-yard run for Amari DiMercato to the 39. 10-yard pass from Duggan to Jared Wiley right down the seam, first down.
That was midfield. A really good one. Really good play.
Midfield, and they're driving. They're driving. And on 1st and 10, Max Duggan gets sacked, and he gets crunched by Mykel Williams.
Yeah, I kind of audibly gasped on that one.
Gets crunched. Loses 8 yards. And at that point, the game, we didn't know it then, but the game was over. Because that sets you up into 2nd and 18. And you're just not going to convert a lot of 2nd and 18s. You're already down 10. Sure enough, they end up punting 3 plays later. Georgia goes on an 11-play drive to make it 24-7. Max Duggan throws a terrible pick. Touchdown, terrible pick, touchdown. It's 38-7 at halftime, and the national championship game is over. That sack was functionally the end of the ball game. And I thought that it was a credit, again, to the Georgia defensive line, which dominated this game. They dominated this game.
Yeah, it was scary to watch.
There's going to be, like, one more thing before we leave. And we can talk more about this over the course of the week. It's the offseason now. We got plenty of time. But one more thing before we leave. There was this, like, notion last night on social media. And I think a lot of people just want to roast TCU. Baylor fans want to roast TCU. People who don't like TCU want to roast TCU. Do what you want. But there was this notion last night of people who are like, this is why Alabama should have been in the playoffs. Or any of these other teams, like these other teams would have given them a better fight. Would have given Georgia a better fight. And maybe that's true. I do wonder, and Sonny Dykes said it going into halftime, he goes, I think we came out pretty wide-eyed in this game. And I think it showed at times. I think they looked like the moment was too big for them. But I would caution you against kind of going down this path of, this is why you just got to keep Alabama in, or these blue bloods or anything like that. Because what you're functionally saying is that we should rule 120 teams ineligible for the national championship.
Mm-hmm.
Like, from the word go. We should just say, yours not good enough. Right? That for TCU, a team that went through the regular season undefeated, lost an overtime game to Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game, then beat the unbeaten Big 10 champion.
Mm-hmm.
What you're saying is that's not good enough for them to be in the national championship. And that strikes me as a really nihilistic view of college football. Now, we can talk about the warts that college football has. I think there is this huge gap between the haves and the have-nots, but that's just kind of the way that the sport operates. We can talk about that. There's plenty of time in the offseason. But I think this immediate knee-jerk of going to, shouldn't have even been in the playoff.
Well,
I think that you need to zoom out on that and think about what you're really saying with that, because what you're saying is that it doesn't really matter what these teams do. They shouldn't have a path to the playoff, which is, in my opinion, again, wrong-headed and relatively nihilistic about, like, it's very eat Arby's of college football.
Well, and that's the other thing, is those people that we're saying that are typically the same people that turn around every single year and say, I'm so sick of seeing Georgia and Alabama in this thing. I'm so sick of seeing this. And it's like, yes, in order for that to change, you have to make it to where people like TCU can get in there, because even though they went out there and they got stomped on last night, nothing is ever going to change if they don't even get to that point. The momentum that TCU, like you said, the lifeline of this whole sport is recruiting. The impact that's going to have solely because they made it to the championship is going to make those ripple effects that will then eventually lead to where there are competitive games with other people other than Alabama and Georgia. But if you allow those two teams and the Michigans or the Notre Dames or the little conglomerate of 7 or 8 teams that are always in it every single year, if you allow them to be the only people to ever make it, that gap is never going to close, ever.
You're spot on. That's it. That, like, what you saw last night was ugly.
But it's a ripple effect.
But that is how you welcome more teams into the party. Mm-hmm. It's not always pretty, obviously not. And TCU played like butt, and Georgia played incredible. But the only way that we are going to have a more equitable sport is to continue to keep the door open, that, and at least to theoretically, that you can earn your way into winning a national championship. Mm-hmm. It hasn't, that to me is an important part of this conversation that maybe is going overlooked. And I want to make sure that we're not kind of diving into nihilism of like, it just doesn't matter. Because it does.
Yeah, because think about the 2 semifinal games we got. Both of them were outstanding games. This one might have been a stinker, but if you keep chipping away at that, eventually you're going to have a playoff that's actually fun to watch the entire way through, because it hasn't been like that in any of the years past.
Congratulations to Georgia, national champions. Mm-hmm. It's a great season for TCU. It's going to sting for about a week, but in about a week I think they'll look around and say, man, we played in the national championship game. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty cool. Anyway, that closes out the college football season. And really, again, all that's left is the Cowboys.
Sticky.
Hey, thanks for watching this clip here on YouTube. If you like this kind of stuff and you want more of it, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And remember, you can watch us live every weekday at noon at TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, or here on YouTube. And if you want more of the best coverage of football in the state of Texas, check out TexasFootball.com and become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football Insider at TexasFootball.com/subscribe.